Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be building a radio button view for iOS. Now you may be familiar with being able to use a radio button on macOS, but it's not currently available to use in iOS, which I thought was kind of silly, and because of that I'm building my own today. If you're ready to learn how to build your own radio button view, then stay tuned. Let's learn together. So here we are in our brand new Xcode project, and let's go ahead and just dive right in and start building out our radio button view. So we will come down here and we will create a new struct, and this struct we will call radio button, and our radio button view will take a generic, and this generic will be identifiable, and it will also be hashable. And we will also pass in a content parameter, which is just going to be a view. And then all of that will again conform to just a regular view. Now this is how we make a custom view in SwiftUI. And it would help if I spelled that right. Identifiable, there we are. This is how we make a custom view in SwiftUI. So let's go ahead and let's say that we have a var body with some view that returns some view, and now our build should be happy. There we go. So what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to take a group of data and pass that into our view and let our view decide which one is selected and which one isn't. And we want that to be controlled from the outside, which is why we've passed in the generics to the view like this. Now let's go ahead and set up these parameters for our view. So our first one we will just call options, and that will just be an array of our identifiable and hashable type. And then we will take a binding to our selection, and that will be an optional. There we go, an optional for whatever generic type that we've passed in here. And then we will create a view builder that takes our content like that. Now, don't get too caught up over generics just yet. We'll go over it here in just a minute, how this is used, and it'll make a lot more sense, so don't worry. Now, the next thing I like going ahead and doing is setting up an initializer. The initializer isn't required because Swift is smart enough to figure out that these are the parameters we need, and it will go ahead and name them appropriately. However, I personally just like to create initializers more than anything else to not have to require the names of each of these parameters. To me, it makes the API for this radio button view just that much nicer. So let's go ahead and do that next. Let's say that we want an init, and Apple has already figured out exactly what we need for that. So we will say that we want to put all these on multiple lines. So we'll highlight them and press Control M, and that'll put it on multiple lines. Now it got close with these. So our options is just an array of T. Now the selection, it got actually kind of close, but also kind of not. So it does take an identifiable and hashable type, but that is a type of T, which is our generic that we're going to pass in here. And we don't actually want to set the default to nil. And as you can see that it's a binding of this variable here. So let's go ahead and we will wrap this with some brackets, angle brackets, and we will say that this is a binding to that optional variable of T, which means the variable of selection is optional, but the binding itself is not optional. And now the last thing that we want to clean up here is our content. So again, as we can see, it's got the parentheses with identifiable and hashable, which we don't actually need those because we have our generic type T here that tells us that it is of that type. And the type that it returns is not necessarily a view directly. It returns whatever content that it's being passed, which we're passing in up here. Now, as you can see, our custom view that we're writing here, it says it cannot assign a value of binding type T as T. So we don't, that's because it's passing the binding in here, and we don't want the binding value, we want what's referred to as the wrapped value. So this underscore says that we don't want the whole binding being passed, we want the value that it is binding to be passed. So with that, our next step is to actually just build out the view. Now, I am going to use a group here, and I'm using a group here because I want the parent or whoever calls this radio button view to decide how the layout is going to look. So if somebody calls this view in a V stack, I want it to stack vertically. If they call it in an H stack, I want it to stack horizontally. And because of that, we're going to wrap our view in a group. So now our next step would be to say for each option, we want the ID to be .self, and we know that it's safe to have this as .self because we've told it that it conforms to both identifiable and hashable. And so then we want to read the option value in that array, and we want to just create a button, and our button, we want whenever the user clicks it for the selection to equal that new option, and for the label of that button, we want it to be whatever content that we get passed with the option. And we don't want the capital C content like our autocomplete just added. We want our lowercase content because we want this variable here. Nice. And then there's one extra little step. I don't like styling it just based on the default here. I want the users to be able to style this however they want. So because of that, let's say that we want our button style to be a plain button style, and that'll let the user decide what this looks like. And with that, we're actually ready to go ahead and start using this in a view. So now before we start using it in a view, we want to go ahead and create a custom variable or a custom type that will conform to identifiable and hashable so that we can use this in a radio button view. Now let's go ahead and do that. So let's say that we have a struct, and this struct, let's call it pizza toppings. Let's call it pizza topping. There we go. And it will be identifiable and hashable, and it will have a unique ID, and it will have a name. So now we can say that we want our pizza toppings to be an array of pizza topping, and we'll give it a name. So let's make our first pizza topping a pepperoni, and then we'll make our next topping a bacon topping, and we'll do another one, pizza topping, and this will be a sausage pizza topping. And let's just do one more for extra cheese. There we go. Nice. So now we have an array of pizza toppings to work with. And this is where this custom component really starts to shine. So let's go ahead and add this to our view. So we will say, we don't need this image here, but let's change the text. So let's say that we want to choose your favorite pizza topping. There we go. And now inside of our view, we could say that we have our radio button view, and our options will be our pizza toppings. Now we haven't created a selection yet, so let's go ahead and come back up here and create a selection. So we'll say that our @state variable for selected topping is an optional pizza topping. So that's perfect, that'll work. And so we will say that this is our selected topping, and it takes a binding. So we'll put our $sign here so that it knows that that's a binding. And then we've got our view. So let's say that our view takes a topping, and then we'll pass into that an HTAG, and this HTAG will have an image with a system name. This system name will vary, so if the topping is equal to our selected topping, then we want to display check mark dot circle dot fill. Otherwise, we just want it to display circle. There we go. And we also want to display the text with our topping dot name. There we are. Very cool. Now, as you can see, this has got all of our radio buttons lined up center aligned. So let's fix that. And let's say that we want to put this in a VStack. And we'll close our VStack there. And then we'll change the alignment of our VStack to leading. Nice. And now we have a great way to be able to let the user select one item at a time. So as you can see, it selected the pepperoni option. And if we click on sausage, nice. Now it unchecked pepperoni and checked the sausage. And then we can even make this just a little bit nicer by saying that we want the foreground style for this so that when the topping is equal to our selected topping, then we want the foreground style to be dot blue. Otherwise, we just want it to be the primary color. There we are. And that will, doing the primary color here instead of just black will ensure that this also works in not just light mode, but also dark mode. So let's go ahead, and now if we select pepperoni, nice, pepperoni turns blue. And if we select extra cheese, it turns blue, and bacon, same thing. Very cool. And with that, we were able to create our custom radio button view, and it works on any Apple platform, not just for macOS. Now, if you enjoyed this video, then please like, share, and subscribe. And if you leave a comment, just be nice about it. And again, feel free to share this with your friends and get their opinion on it too. Thanks. Have a great day.